The ledger sits between them like a loaded gun. Black leather, gold corners, 200 names written in perfect cursive. Frank Lucas slides the envelope across mahogany wood. $50,000. Every bill counted twice. Every Friday. Same ritual, same silence. January 28, 1975. 5:47 a.m., Teaneck, New Jersey. The world explodes. Sledgehammers kiss the front door. 30 federal agents flood through like Judgment Day. DIA windbreakers. FBI badges. Strike Force fury. They're not looking for drugs. They're not looking for cash. They're hunting for the book. In the basement, behind false walls, under paint cans that never held paint, they find it. The ledger that bought a city. Page after page, line after line, names, ranks, prices. FLPC, $50,000 every Friday. Not petty cash. Police commissioner. Detective Sergeant Murphy, $5,000 weekly. Captain Rodriguez, $10,000 monthly. Lieutenant Williams, $15,000 per operation. Over 200 badges. All with price tags. This isn't a drug empire. This is a protection racket that makes the mafia look like amateurs. Frank Lucas didn't just sell heroin, he bought the law. Wholesale. Cut 2, federal interrogation room, no windows, no mercy, just fluorescent truth and the weight of consequences. Frank sits calm. Pressed suit. Steady hands, eyes that have already seen the ending. The prosecutor drops the ledger on steel table. It lands like a verdict. Mr. Lucas, he says, tapping names with his finger. 200 corrupt officers. 1 police commissioner. You understand what happens if we open this book in federal court? Frank doesn't blink. I understand what happens if you don't. Here's the impossible choice. Cooperate and betray every badge that kept him breathing. Stay silent and die in a cage while dirty cops retire with pensions. Loyalty versus survival. King versus rat. Empire versus legend. Frank slides the ledger back toward the prosecutor, opens it to the first page, points to the police commissioner's initials. You want to know how a nobody from North Carolina controlled New York City? Frank says quietly. You buy the system that's supposed to destroy you. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a crime story. It's the blueprint for how silence becomes power, how loyalty becomes currency, and how the man who keeps receipts becomes untouchable. Until the receipts become evidence. The prosecutor leans forward. Are you ready to talk, Mr. Lucas? Frank Lucas looks at the camera. At you. At history. The silent man lives, the loud man dies. But the man who writes it down? He taps the ledger once. That man becomes legend. The smoke in the back room of Small's Paradise doesn't rise. It hangs, heavy, suspended like secrets waiting to be told. April 1968. 3 months before the king dies. Bumpy Johnson sits in shadow, oxygen tank hissing beside his chair like a countdown clock. His heart is failing. The doctors give him months. The streets give him weeks. Frank Lucas stands at attention, never sits when Bumpy's in the room. 20 years younger. Hungry in ways Bumpy remembers being hungry. The silence between them weighs more than words. Bumpy speaks slow. Every breath costs him time he doesn't have to waste. Frank, you know why Dutch Schultz died? He doesn't wait for an answer. Kings don't ask questions. They deliver lessons. He thought violence was power. Put a gun to enough heads, you own the city. Wrong. Dead wrong. He taps ash from a cigarette his doctor said would kill him. Violence is expensive. Violence is loud. Violence brings heat you can't buy your way out of. Frank leans forward. This feels different. This feels like inheritance. Every king before me made the same mistake. Bumpy continues, his voice dropping to something almost confessional. They paid street cops, beat walkers, detectives, precinct captains, the ones who could look the other way on a corner. Small thinking. Survival money. He pauses to breathe. The oxygen tank hisses louder, impatient. I did it for 30 years, Frank. Kept me breathing, kept me out of cages. But it never made me untouchable. The word hangs there, untouchable. The Italians don't pay cops. They pay judges. They pay prosecutors. They pay the people who decide if evidence exists. That's why they run this city and we just survive in it. Frank's mind races. He's watching a master class in power architecture from a dying professor. Bumpy has never pulled back the curtain this far. You know my biggest failure? Bumpy asks. His grip tightens on the chair arm. 30 years of paying cops and I got nothing to show for it. No records. No receipts. No insurance. A cop retires, his replacement squeezes me for more money. A new captain transfers in, I start negotiations from zero. I bought protection, but I never bought leverage. He leans forward, every inch still dangerous. In America, the law ain't broken, Frank. The law is for sale, and if you're buying retail, you're already losing. The next king of Harlem won't be the one with the most guns, won't be the loudest or the flashiest. It'll be the one who understands that power isn't taking what you want. It's making the system work for you. Frank feels the weight of succession. The question forming in his mind is dangerous. Does he have the intelligence to build what Bumpy's describing, or will he default to violence like everyone else? Bumpy reads the doubt. You're wondering if you're smart enough. Not a question, a statement. Frank, smart isn't about books. It's about understanding what people want. Cops want money. Politicians want money. Judges want money. Everybody's for sale. The question is whether you're disciplined enough to keep receipts on everybody you buy. He grabs Frank's wrist, grip surprisingly strong for a dying man. You don't fight the system. You feed it. You don't run from the law. You own it. You don't fear the men in uniform. You put their names in your book. With proof, Frank, always with proof. Because without documentation, a bribe is just a gift. With documentation, a bribe is leverage. 3 months later. July 7th, 1968. Wells Restaurant, Sunday afternoon. Bumpy Johnson collapses over his breakfast. Frank catches him before he hits the floor. The king of Harlem is dying in his arms, and the restaurant freezes like someone paused the world. Bumpy's lips move. Frank leans close. Don't be flashy, don't be loud. Each word is a fight against death, and Frank, keep receipts. Then he's gone. The king is dead. The funeral is standing room only. Every player in Harlem shows respect. But Frank notices the Italians in the back, Lucchese family, Gambino representatives, watching like predators who just spotted wounded prey. They think Harlem is up for grabs. They think the throne is empty. They don't know Frank Lucas has already bought a ticket to Southeast Asia. They don't know about the black leather ledger with gold corners forming in his mind. They don't know about the plan that will rewrite corruption itself. The silent man lives, the loud man dies, and the man who keeps receipts, that man becomes legend. September 1968. Bangkok International Airport. While America counts body bags on the evening news, Frank Lucas counts opportunity in the cargo hold. The Golden Triangle. 3 countries where borders mean nothing and law is just a rumor whispered in distant capitals. Frank steps off the military transport into air thick enough to choke ambition. But he's not here for comfort. He's here to cut out 50 years of Italian middlemen with one impossible supply chain. Every dealer in Harlem is a customer. They buy from the Italians, who buy from the French, who buy from the Turks, who buy from farmers Frank is about to meet face to face. By the time heroin reaches 116th Street, it's been stepped on 5 times, cut with quinine and baby powder, taxed by every greedy hand that touched it. 10% purity. Garbage designed to keep junkies sick, not satisfied. Frank Lucas doesn't want to be a customer. He wants to be the source. The jungle roads wind up into mountains where maps stop and money talks in any language. Frank meets Chinese suppliers who have never sold to an American directly, never sold to a black man, period. They laugh until Frank opens his briefcase. Cash, American dollars, stacks wrapped neat and respectful. The laughter stops. He negotiates what the mafia never could. Direct access, factory prices, pure heroin at $4,000 per kilo. In New York, that same kilo costs $50,000 from Italian suppliers. The math is simple. The profit is obscene. Frank buys 100 kilos. Cash. No credit. No promises. Just discipline and hunger meeting opportunity. But buying it is the easy part. Moving it home requires genius that borders on blasphemy. The cadaver connection. While mothers fold flags and weep over closed caskets, Frank sees the only pipeline the law will never search. Dead American servicemen returning from Vietnam. Flag-draped coffins. Sacred cargo that customs agents salute instead of inspect. Frank pays morticians, pays transport officers, pays the entire chain of custody that handles America's fallen heroes. The heroin travels home inside bodies that once fought for freedom. The irony cuts deep. So does the profit. Blue magic hits Harlem streets in October 1968 like a nuclear event. 100% pure pharmaceutical-grade heroin in a world selling 30% trash. It's so clean that users overdose from their normal dose. Bodies drop. Terror spreads. But in the twisted logic of addiction, death becomes marketing. If it killed him, it must be the real thing. Junkies travel from Brooklyn, Queens, New Jersey just to buy Frank's product. He undercuts Italian prices by 50% while delivering triple the quality. This isn't competition. This is extinction-level disruption of a market the 5 families have controlled since heroin existed. The Italians notice within weeks. Revenue streams that fed generations suddenly dry up overnight. They are lions watching their jungle burn. First come polite messages. Sit-downs in dimly lit clubs. They offer Frank the traditional arrangement. Work under their umbrella. Give them 40%. Accept a ceiling on territory and volume. It's the deal every black dealer has taken. The tax for breathing in their world. Frank responds with silence. He continues operations as if they don't exist. This disrespect cuts deeper than bullets. In their world, respect is currency, and Frank just declared their money worthless. The messages turn violent. A car bomb outside Frank's building. Wrong target. The explosion kills a schoolteacher. A drive-by on 125th Street. Wrong car. The bullets hit a grandmother buying groceries. Each failed attempt makes Frank more mythological. The man the mafia can't kill. The ghost who moves through Harlem untouched. But Frank understands what the streets don't. He can't win a war against the Italians with guns alone. They have more soldiers, more experience, more political connections. Violence is their native language. He needs what Bumpy taught him. He needs to buy the system itself. December 1968, a restaurant in Lower Manhattan. Private room. Frank sits across from a man in a suit that costs more than most cars. No badge visible, no introduction needed. The authority radiates from him like heat from a furnace. The man slides a blank notebook across white tablecloth. Black leather, gold corners. Empty pages waiting to reshape corruption itself. Start writing names, he says. Voice flat. Transactional. Ranks. Precincts. What you'll pay weekly. Frank opens the ledger. The pages smell like new leather and old money. And bring cash next Friday. 50,000 every week. No exceptions. Frank picks up the pen, writes the first name, then the second. By midnight, the foundation of an empire built on receipts begins to take shape. The Italians have guns and history. Frank Lucas has something better. He has documentation. Friday is not a day of the week in Frank Lucas's world. Friday is ceremony. Friday is architecture. Friday is the day $50,000 moves through New York City like blood through veins nobody can see. The system doesn't start with corruption, it starts with precision. Every Friday, 5 a.m. before honest cops clock in for their shifts, the machine turns on. Frank Lucas doesn't hand money to cops on street corners. That's amateur hour. That's how you get caught. He builds infrastructure more efficient than the city of New York itself. 3 bagmen. 5 rotating drop locations. Never the same place twice in a month. A diner bathroom in Queens. A parking garage in the Bronx. A hotel lobby in Midtown where businessmen blend into marble and nobody notices cash changing hands. The money flows up the chain with military precision. Beat cops get 500 weekly, detectives get 5,000, captains get 10, lieutenants get 15. And at the top of the pyramid, sitting in an office with a view of the city he's supposed to protect, the police commissioner collects his envelope, $50,000. Every Friday. No exceptions. But Frank keeps the ledger. Black leather with gold corners, every name written in perfect cursive, every rank documented, every payment recorded with dates and amounts. Detective Murphy, narcotics, 1,500 weekly. Captain Rodriguez, Central Harlem, 5,000 monthly, initials only for the commissioner, PC 50,000 every Friday. The genius isn't the bribes. The genius is the isolation. No single cop knows how many others are on Frank's payroll. Detective Murphy thinks he's one of maybe 10 dirty cops helping Frank. Captain Rodriguez believes he's part of a small exclusive club. They each think they're special. They each think they're alone. This prevents conspiracy, prevents betrayal, prevents rats. Because if you flip, you expose yourself. And you don't know who else might fall. Could be your partner. Could be your captain. Could be the commissioner himself. Betrayal becomes suicide. Rats can't form because they don't know which sewer they're in. The moral rot spreads through the nip like cancer through tissue. Good cops notice bad cops getting rich. New suits, new cars, expensive watches on detective salaries. Evidence rooms get sloppy. Heroin seizures disappear before trial. Witnesses recant testimony overnight. Arrests get thrown out on technicalities that smell like bribery but prove like coincidence. Enter Detective Richie Roberts. Essex County. Honest to the point of stupidity. He once found nearly $1 million in unmarked bills in a car trunk and turned it in. Every cop in New Jersey thinks he's insane. His wife divorced him because integrity doesn't pay private school tuition. He's broke, alone, and incorruptible in a world where corruption is currency. Roberts doesn't know about the ledger yet. But he feels the weight of it. He feels the resistance every time he tries to build a case that touches Harlem. He watches Frank Lucas operate in plain sight, watches evidence evaporate, watches cases collapse, watches the system protect the very criminal it's supposed to destroy. The binary opposition crystallizes. Law versus order. When the law becomes criminal, what happens to justice? Every Friday, the ritual continues. Midtown restaurant, white tablecloths. Politicians having lunch. Frank's lieutenant enters the bathroom. 2 stalls. One occupied. He enters the empty stall. Places an envelope on top of the toilet paper dispenser. Walks out. 30 seconds later, the police commissioner exits the other stall, picks up the envelope, feels the weight, $50,000. The man sworn to stop Frank Lucas instead enables him. He washes his hands, checks his reflection, adjusts his tie, returns to lunch with the deputy mayor. But empires fall not from external pressure, they fall from internal arrogance. Frank buys his mother a mansion in New Jersey. 12 rooms, swimming pool, garden bigger than the sharecropper fields she picked cotton in 40 years ago. Then he buys himself a Rolls-Royce. Custom interior, his initials on the headrests. Finally, March 8, 1971, Madison Square Garden. The fight of the century, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. Frank Lucas walks in wearing a chinchilla coat, $100,000 of fur draped over his shoulders like royalty. He sits ringside. Better seats than Italian bosses. Better seats than Hollywood celebrities. Better seats than people who are supposed to matter. A photographer snaps a picture. Frank Lucas in his chinchilla throne. Visible. Loud. Everything Bumpy told him never to be. The photograph travels. Eventually it lands on a cluttered desk in Essex County. Richie Roberts picks it up. Studies the face. The coat. The arrogance radiating from glossy paper. He turns to his partner. Who the hell is Frank Lucas? The hunt begins, and somewhere in a safe in Teaneck, New Jersey, a black leather ledger with gold corners waits to destroy everyone whose name is written inside. That chinchilla coat was never just a coat. It was a neon sign in a graveyard. It was a scream in a library. It was the moment Frank Lucas forgot the first rule of power: invisibility is the only shield that never breaks. The photograph haunts Richie Roberts like a ghost demanding justice. Frank Lucas ringside at the fight of the century. Visible. Arrogant. Untouchable. Roberts pins it to his office wall in Essex County. Stares at it every morning with coffee that tastes like frustration. He asks the same question that will consume the next 2 years of his life. Who is this man who operates in plain sight while the nip pretends he doesn't exist? He looks at the Italian bosses sitting 3 rows back from Frank. The hierarchy of the street has inverted. The servant has become the master. But masters have enemies. Roberts builds a task force in 1973. Federal agents only, DIA, FBI, Treasury investigators. No nip badges allowed. Using New York cops to catch Frank Lucas is like asking the fox to guard the henhouse, except the fox is on the payroll and the chickens are heroin. Roberts has watched too many cases die under mysterious circumstances. Evidence disappearing from locked rooms, witnesses developing sudden amnesia, warrants delayed by judges who suddenly discover constitutional concerns. The surveillance begins like a war of attrition. Unmarked cars follow Frank's drivers from Harlem to Newark. Wiretaps record coded conversations that go dead when they turn interesting. Agents photograph deliveries, document meetings, map the entire distribution network. They watch millions of dollars move through the city like water through pipes nobody can see. But every time Roberts thinks he has something, it dissolves. Warehouse raids turn up nothing but legally imported textiles. Stash houses they were certain held heroin are immaculate, floors still wet from being washed an hour before arrival. Warrants requested on Monday arrive the following Thursday, 2 days after shipments move. It's like someone is reading their playbook in advance. Someone high. Someone in uniform. Roberts realizes the terrifying truth. He isn't hunting a drug dealer. He is hunting the employer of the police force. The corruption isn't a side effect, it's the operating system. So he changes tactics. Stop chasing heroin. Chase money. The Al Capone strategy. They got Capone on tax evasion when murder charges wouldn't stick. Frank Lucas lives like royalty on paper income that wouldn't buy lunch. The mansion in New Jersey. The Rolls-Royce. The investments. The math doesn't work. The lifestyle screams guilt. Treasury agents dig through financial records like archaeologists hunting artifacts. Bank accounts. Property deeds. Car registrations. How does a man with no visible business, no declared income, buy mansions and mink coats? How does cash move? Where does it sleep at night? Money leaves a trail that glows in the dark when you know how to look. Meanwhile, paranoia devours Frank's empire from inside. The air changes. The silence that once protected them now feels like quiet before execution. Trust evaporates like loyalty in sunlight. His own lieutenants start looking suspicious. Who's talking? Who's wearing a wire? Who's the rat? Frank feels the surveillance, sees the unmarked cars, knows the phones are tapped, money moves frantically. Cash gets buried, assets transferred. The organization fractures under pressure it can't see but definitely feels. Lieutenants whisper about informants, about leaks, about Richie Roberts. The name passes through the organization like a curse. But Frank makes the mistake that defines hubris. He keeps the ledger. Black leather. Gold corners. 200 names. The most dangerous object in America. He keeps it in his house in Teaneck. Behind false walls. Under paint cans that never held paint. He keeps it because he believes it is his insurance policy. He thinks if the law ever comes, he can wave the book and the city will back down to protect its own reputation. He thinks the names inside make him safe. He is wrong. The names inside make him the most dangerous man in America, and dangerous men get taken down. January 28th, 1975. 5:47 am. The world explodes. Simultaneous raids on 6 Frank Lucas properties. Federal agents with sledgehammers and warrants, signed by judges Frank doesn't own. This isn't a knock, this is an invasion. 30 agents swarm the Teaneck mansion like Judgment Day, dogs barking, children screaming. The illusion of safety shatters in seconds. They tear the house apart, rip up floorboards, smash through drywall. They find cash, mountains of it, stacked in walls, hidden in furniture, buried in the backyard. They find drugs, kilos of blue magic still wrapped in plastic from the Golden Triangle. They find weapons. But in the basement, an agent shouts. He holds it up like the holy grail of corruption. Black leather, gold corners, the ledger. It is the Rosetta Stone of corruption. It translates the chaos of the streets into the order of bribery. Page after page of names written in perfect cursive. Detective Sergeant Murphy, 500 weekly. Captain Rodriguez, 10,000 monthly. Lieutenant Williams, 15,000 per operation. And at the top, the initials that will destroy careers and rewrite nifty history. PC 50,000 every Friday. Proof that Frank Lucas didn't just run drugs. He owned the police department wholesale. Federal custody smells like bleach and finality. The interrogation room is cold steel and fluorescent truth. Frank sits calm, pressed suit, steady hands, eyes that have already calculated the cost of everything in his life. The prosecutor enters, drops the ledger on the table. It lands like a verdict. Mr. Lucas, we have 200 corrupt officers documented in your handwriting. Payment schedules, dates, amounts. Enough evidence to dismantle the NIPT and rebuild it from scratch. Frank says nothing. Silence is survival. Silence is the code. You're facing 70 years minimum. Multiple life sentences. Drug trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, corrupting public officials. You'll die in a cage. Your family will visit through glass. Your empire will become a footnote. The prosecutor opens the ledger, points to names. Or you testify, you give us the police department. And maybe you see daylight before you're 90. The impossible choice crystallizes. Die in prison as a legend who kept the code, or live as a rat who betrayed everyone who trusted him. King versus informant. Loyalty versus survival. Everything Frank built his reputation on versus the rest of his life. In his cell that night, Frank sits with ledger pages spread before him. Photocopies, evidence. His own handwriting condemning 200 men who thought they were untouchable. He thinks about Bumpy's last words, "Keep receipts." But Bumpy never said what happens when receipts become evidence, when insurance becomes indictment, when leverage becomes the rope that hangs you. Frank Lucas stares at the names, faces he knows, cops he paid, the system he bought, and he realizes the terrible truth that will haunt him forever. The silent man lives, the loud man dies, but the man who keeps receipts? That man has to choose who survives and who burns. That man discovers that documentation is a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. That man learns the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the thing that makes you untouchable is the very thing that destroys you. The king is dead. The question is, will the rat survive? The courtroom is silent. Not the silence of respect, the silence of execution. Frank Lucas sits in the witness box wearing a suit that once commanded empires. Now it's just fabric covering a man who chose survival over the only thing that ever mattered. The code. The ledger lies open like scripture in a church of betrayal. Black leather. Gold corners. 200 names waiting to be spoken aloud by the man who wrote them in perfect cursive. Frank raises his right hand, swears to tell the truth. The irony cuts deeper than any blade ever could. Mr. Lucas, do you recognize the handwriting in this ledger? Yes, it's mine. His finger lands on Detective Sergeant Murphy's name. $5,000 weekly, every week for 3 years. Murphy sits in the gallery watching his pension evaporate in real time. Frank points, speaks, destroys. Captain Rodriguez, $10,000 monthly. Picked up at the diner on Riverside Drive. Lieutenant Williams, $15,000 per operation. Paid in advance, cash only. This is the Super Bowl of cooperation. The greatest act of betrayal in the history of American organized crime. Frank Lucas, who preached loyalty like gospel, who built an empire on silence, is singing louder than anyone has ever sung. His testimony dismantles the Night D with surgical precision. Over 100 arrests, dozens of forced resignations. The Special Investigations Unit, once elite, completely gutted. Entire precincts disbanded because corruption wasn't just present, it was infrastructure. The NIP doesn't reform, it implodes. The department must rebuild itself from scratch. New protocols, new oversight, new fear. Because nobody knows whose name is on the next page. Nobody knows who else Frank Lucas bought with Friday envelopes. Frank walks out under federal protection, alive but spiritually dead. He traded his legend for his life. He traded the throne for a calendar. Instead of dying in prison as a martyr to silence, he serves 15 years of his 70-year sentence. Released in 1981, a breathing ghost in a world that buried him the day he opened that book. The streets don't forget. Neither do the cops he destroyed. There are no welcome home parties, no parades down 125th Street. Just whispers that follow him like shadows. Rat, snitch, traitor. He tries going straight, gets legitimate jobs, lives quietly in New Jersey. But invisibility doesn't work when everyone knows your face, when your betrayal precedes you into every room. Death threats arrive weekly. Former officers who lost careers, families, pensions because Frank Lucas decided his life mattered more than loyalty. Some threats are specific, some are vague, all of them are real. The man who once owned the police department now fears the badges he destroyed. But the legend mutates in strange ways. Young dealers who weren't born when blue magic ruled Harlem still tell stories. They talk about beating the Italians, about the coffins from Vietnam, about being untouchable. They worship the rise, they forget the ending, they edit out the testimony. They ignore the federal courtroom where Frank Lucas pointed at 200 names and became the thing he despised most. They want the crown without the cross, the glory without the cost. In later interviews, journalists ask about regret. Frank discusses heroin without emotion, talks about violence like weather. But when they ask about the ledger, about the testimony, about becoming a cooperating witness, he pauses. The silence stretches longer than comfort allows. "I did what I had to do to survive," he finally says. But the words sound hollow, like he's trying to convince himself more than the camera. Because Frank Lucas spent his entire criminal career believing loyalty was the only currency that mattered. That silence was power. That keeping the code made you untouchable. He learned the hardest lesson of all. Being untouchable just means you're alone when the bill comes due. Frank Lucas died in 2019 at age 88. Natural causes. He outlived Bumpy Johnson, outlived the Italian bosses, outlived most of the cops in his book. By the logic of survival, he won. By the logic of the street, he lost everything the day he chose breathing over the code. Somewhere in New York, in a federal evidence room, the ledger still exists. Black leather with gold corners, 200 names written in perfect cursive. Some are dead, some retired to Florida. Some still wake up sweating, remembering the day their name was read aloud by the man they thought they controlled. The silent man lives, the loud man dies. But the man who keeps receipts, that man learns that documentation is forever, that insurance becomes evidence, that the thing that makes you untouchable becomes the thing that destroys you. Frank Lucas kept receipts, and in the end, the receipts kept him, alive but alone, free but forever imprisoned by the choice he made when survival mattered more than respect. What's the price of being untouchable? And when the bill comes due, when the choice becomes loyalty or life, legend or breathing, can you afford to pay it? Frank Lucas answered that question with a pen in a federal courtroom. The king became a rat. The legend became a cautionary tale. And the man who once owned a city learned that some prices are too high, even for kings. Especially for kings.